Welcome. I am Jane Schmatzer, and I am the Director of Adult Ministries here at Christ to All. Thank you for joining me this morning. We're going to have a fabulous conversation with Pastor Paul Dickerson. And Pastor Paul is joining us from the same church, actually, that Pastor Jeff Cloeter is the executive pastor for. And Paul Dickerson is in charge of some really, really important things at that church. So he is the campus pastor of the primary founding location, and he's in charge of discipleship for both sites. So it's a big job, and we're just so excited to have the opportunity to have you with us today, Pastor Paul. Just to kind of hear from you some of the learnings that have been going on at your congregation. I love the fact that it's multi-site. So it's not just learning for one congregation, but learning at two at the same time, which just doubles the fun, I'm sure, at times. But for the benefit of our customer base, some of them will be single site locations and others will be multi-site. So I think that the wisdom that you're going to share with us today will be equally helpful to everybody. So thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Excited about kind of our partnership with CTA, with kind of all of our new friends who are just reading Loved and Sent, kind of getting exposed to this idea for the first time, and for our conversation today. So ready whenever you guys are.
Okay, well, let's just dive right in then. Our topic for today is maintaining a loved and sent culture within your staff or within the staff. So kind of from that leadership level, how do you maintain culture? And so I think it gets an even more nuanced when you have a multi-site. And so you've got campus pastors at both sites, and you've got congregations that are more tightly connected to each site. But still, I think that there are some commonalities probably across making that happen. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to kind of unearth some of those today. When you all started the Loved and Sent journey, which has been almost 10 years ago, I think now, you wanted to do that with both campuses at the same time, I believe. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
Yeah, the start of it, so a little bit of the history kind of behind
Perfect.
it. So it actually, Loved and Sent for Christ Memorial and Reliance started before I got here. So I started as an intern at Christ Memorial in 2018-19. Loved and Sent have been going on for a little bit before that. I think Pastor Jeff first published the book right around 2015. And before then, he had been kind of the campus pastor at Reliant. Pastor Jeff planted our Reliant campus. They were a portable campus at the time, so they worshiped in all sorts of different venues. And then right around 2014-15, our senior pastor at the time, Greg Smith, retired. Pastor Jeff was then called to be senior pastor. And that's probably when kind of Loved and Sent really became our words around the church, kind of the shorthand for our mission statement and who we are as God's people here. So that's a little bit of the background. And then from there, it just kind of started rolling out through the congregation. And I think one of the things we'll talk about that was really key was the Love Sent Servant event, that community serving thing that was a way for us to be loved and sent together, helped kind of establish that culture.
Perfect. Yes. I think it's one of the things that as I talked with different people at your congregation, that serving day and the chance to be together as one worshiping body, going out and serving and then coming back and celebrating that service was definitely a mountaintop moment.
Yeah, I think it was. One of the challenges of multi-site is there's not always a ton of together time. And so in our context, we've got 2 sites. We just changed our Sunday morning schedule. We've got 4 different worshiping communities. So for those listening or watching later, even if even if you only have one physical location, the old adage is if you have more than one service, that means you have more than one congregation. And maybe you guys have, leaders have experienced that where each service kind of has its own flavor, maybe in some ways its own culture, things that are important to it. And so um, that's just kind of expounded exponentially if there's a multi-site. And so the servant event gave us a way to one of those touch points where we're all together kind of doing the same thing, because I think if there was a kind of a secret sauce to it, it's because the service events didn't necessarily happen on one campus or another, but they were out in the community. And so what became attractive to people, say, I'm going to sign up for this service event versus that service event, wasn't necessarily where it was, but it had to do with what you're interested in serving in. So kind of where your heart is and how you want to serve out in the community, but also really kind of the nuts and bolts of what fits in your schedule. Is it morning is better than afternoon? Is it something that we can bring the kids to or not bring the kids to? But what that did is, by making the determining factor not site location or church location, it kind of mixed everybody together, and you ended up with these different combinations of people where all of a sudden you're serving with somebody that you don't necessarily worship with on Saturday night or Sunday morning. And that could be someone who calls kind of our Christ Memorial campus their church home, but they go to the late service versus someone who goes to a Saturday service, and those people never see each other. Or it could be someone who goes to our Reliant campus and is at like our 9 o'clock service, and they don't see each other because they're at different worshiping services. So it kind of just mixed everybody together in a way that doesn't usually happen on Sunday mornings or when we gather together. And so, what it did was give our people a bigger vision of the church. And so a lot of times when we think of church, we think of a place, where we might think of the people who sit around us on Sunday morning or Saturday night.
Right.
What the servant event did was it said the church is bigger than just my service or just the people that I see. The church is bigger than just my campus or where I might serve, and think there's a lot more than it can be. And giving that bigger vision of the church just helps say, yeah, we're in this together. We're not alone, or we're not just kind of this small huddle of people. There's more, and God is up to more. So it just kind of lifts the eyes a little bit that way.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. And I think the fact that servant events have traditionally meant overseas, or at least someplace really distant. It might still be in the United States, but it's Alaska, or it's, someplace that it's not just next door. And this was sort of taking that model and turning it on its head and saying, no, servant event is like my neighbor, literally. And what does my neighbor look like in terms of like the wide range of projects that you all put together?
Yeah, that's probably one of our values, one of our principles, and just in terms of how we lived out Loved and Sent, is to push everything to its most local level possible. And that doesn't mean that, there's a place for overseas missions, or kind of what sometimes we call overnight mission trips. It's far enough away, you're going to stay a night or more. But the day-to-day walk of discipleship, of following Jesus, those kind of overnight mission trips or a mountaintop experience, how does it happen day to day? How does it happen with neighbors in your community, with the people you're seeing at work or at the grocery store, at school pickup, and those types of things? And so by having it local, we get to say, God has put us here in this place, for us in St. Louis, on purpose. We don't believe that's a mistake. And so how can we bless the people around us that God has also put in this place? And hopefully through that have an opportunity to tell them about Jesus. That's the goal.
Sure. Yeah. And I think something that you said, it's about serving where you are, where you live, and how you live that out. It's really the most important thing to changing culture, because a mountaintop experience is fabulous, but it's lived out someplace else. And when the mountaintop is here, that's different.
Yep. Yeah, we're it's kind of what we were chatting about just kind of before we went live, is how do you establish culture? And Renee reminded us about Eugene Peterson, a long obedience in the same direction
Yes.
Eugene, and I'm thinking of some others who talk about a theology of place. How do I think about where God has planted me?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the day in, kind of day out. How are you following Jesus? And that stuff isn't glamorous. That stuff a lot of times happens out of the spotlight. A lot of times
Mm-hmm.
behind closed doors around our kitchen table with our family or on the porch with a neighbor, or just kind of the day in, day out grind of Sunday morning every single week. That comes every single week, and that can be daunting sometimes. But sometimes we think about it in terms of food and meals. You
Mm-hmm.
can't have like this really rich dinner, 5-star Michelin restaurant every single week, or every single day.
Right.
That's not good. You can't just have dessert all the time. That's not good for you. Sometimes you just need the meat and potatoes, the peanut butter and jelly, the stuff that's going to sustain and
Mm-hmm.
feed you day in and day out. And then you have those mountaintop experiences, and those things are great. And there may be seasons where you're fasting; those things are good too. But it's the day in, day out. That's what establishes culture to the point where it just kind of starts operating in the background because it becomes part of your identity, who you are. This is just kind of how we do things. And that's kind of how I would define cultures, the way things are done around here without necessarily having to say it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, after that first deep dive, where everybody went through the book and then served together and celebrated that moment together, and then you go back to your different sites and you start doing life, right? Like exactly what you talked about. Okay, so now we get back to the rhythm of regular life, and we're not reading that book and we're not, focusing on that 100%. In the same way. So, can you just speak to us a little bit about the challenges of maintaining that energy, that excitement, that goal, in those meat and potatoes moments, if you
Yeah,
will?
yeah. Maintaining the excitement is hard, and I don't know necessarily if I would say that's the goal, because you can't live life at like a level 10 all the time.
Yep.
That's just not reality. And so the question is, how do you continue kind of going in that same direction, even when it's not like the new exciting mountaintop experience type of a thing?
Mm-hmm.
So a couple things that we do to help with that. Um, One, we talk about it regularly. We talk about loved and sent. I mean, it probably shows up in um, one of our sermons, either for me or Pastor Jeff or Pastor Nathan. I would say at least once every month, 6 weeks, and not like explicitly, but that's kind of what part of the message is who you are, what's your purpose, what does God's word say about that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we talk about it regularly in staff, and again, not explicitly saying, all right, you are loved, you are sent, kind of the rah-rah speech. That's not it, but it just kind of is woven into our rhythms of staff meetings and just kind of how we operate with each other, how we talk about one another. So kind of those touch points of reminders of saying, it's kind of like you're going down the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you're going from St. Louis up to Detroit, and you get closer and closer and closer, and then finally you start seeing signs for Detroit, and it says, all right, Detroit's 238 miles, and then you go another 20, 30 miles, and it's all right, Detroit's 200 miles now. And each one of those is like a little way marker that says you're going the right direction, keep going, here's how
Mm-hmm.
much further. Thinking of it like that is just little reminders along the way. Say, yeah, this is who we are. This is who I am. Um, I'm going in the right direction. Just keep going. So these little shots of encouragement, because more and more I've become convinced. I forget where I heard this. Someone smarter than me came up with this, but people need to be reminded more than they need to be instructed. It's not just about
Mm-hmm.
kind of an information dump. It's a reminder of saying, hey, here's who you are. Here's where we've been. Here's what God has been up to. Um, this is good. Keep going. We can do this. And here's what a next step might be.
Oh, that's really good. So, as you journey on, I think that those reminders, that kind of that insight as to like where we've been, and helping people kind of see that progress. That's kind of the unique job of the leader or the leadership, right? And sometimes that's paid staff and sometimes that's volunteers, but I mean, everybody's who steps up to lead kind of takes that mantle on for the culture and for that reminder messaging. So what do you all do when you have shifts and new people entering? I mean, you yourself entered a little
Mhm.
bit after it started, but I know you've had others that have entered and left, since then. So what does that onboarding process look like for somebody who's walking in for the first time and is experiencing loved and sent and trying to take that all in?
Yeah, probably a couple ways to answer that depending on the person and on the position, right? And so when we're talking about kind of our core staff
Mhm.
and whether it's full-time ministry staff or kind of some of our core leaders, elders, council, things like that, um, we talk about person over position. So
Mhm.
we're more interested in who is this person? What's their heart? Are they already kind of bought in to loved and sent, or at least even if they wouldn't use that words, kind of the message behind it,
Mhm.
um, rather than say, well, we've got someone who's never heard of this before and whose kind of experience and bent is somewhat a little bit different than that. Say, well, maybe that wouldn't be the best fit for our culture. So whenever we're thinking about hiring or putting someone in a position, we say, um, what's the person, what's their heart, what's the culture fit, and then we'll start looking at skills and things like that as opposed to the other way around. We want people who are
Right.
qualified, but at the same time, it's you can't teach this. You can teach the skills, you can teach this, you can't teach heart to some extent. So,
Right.
person over position. That goes for our volunteer roles also. And so, one of the things that we look for when we're going to take a volunteer and put them in a leadership position, in a sense, is have they already been doing this even without the position? Have they already
Mhm.
been leading in some ways? Can we think of ways um, that they've been uh, doing the position without the title? And so, quick story of that. There's a older gentleman in our congregation, lost his wife a little over a year ago after a battle with cancer.
Mhm.
And it was maybe about 6 months later. Um, I was going to have a meeting in one of our rooms, and I peeked through the window, and he's in the room. And he's in the room with another member of our church who had also lost his wife about 3 months after this first gentleman. And these two guys were just, I don't know if they were just talking or if they were praying or whatever, but you saw um, the first man just kind of coming alongside and spiritually caring for this other man who had also lost his wife. And that's one of those things where I said, okay, this first guy, his name's it's getting confusing. His name's Lloyd. I said, Lloyd, you should probably be an elder. You're already doing that kind of spiritual care thing. Let's just give you the
Mhm.
title that goes along with how you've already been serving and being sent to our community. So those types of things are what we look for when we're saying we're going to put someone in a leadership position is who's already doing it, who's already bought in and kind of without the fanfare, without the title, serving in the way that we would say this is an example for our people in terms of what we would want to see.
Yeah, that's really good. Um, you have leadership obviously that spans two campus locations, and so give us a sense of how, in your context, how that works. So do you all
Mhm.
meet regularly as a team and, and talk about things that, I mean, obviously Left and Send is a part of that. It's not the main reason you're together, but
Mhm.
like how does that work to keep the campus pastors and and Pastor Jeff is a senior pastor, like the three of you in tight
Yep.
connection?
Yeah, we have different types of meetings that we have depending, and it's intentionally set up that way depending on kind of what the goals and the needs are for that particular meeting. We'll have what we kind of call huddles. That's usually campus specific. So I'll gather with my team once a week, and that's mostly tactical decisions. What's going on this week? What do we need to pay attention to? Where do we need help from each other, and what could kind of cross over, and where we could work together on something. We have kind of higher level strategic meetings, and that's where the different leaders from the campuses get together. So kind of our executive team, Pastor Jeff, myself, Pastor Nathan, who's our Reliant campus pastor, and then Dana, who's our ops director. So kind of handles all the infrastructure for us. So we gather together at least once a month, sometimes more frequently as needed. And then we also have monthly all staff meetings, and so that's anyone who's on the payroll, as well as some key volunteers that we treat as staff. We do that. And the purpose of those meetings a lot of time is communication, what's going on, what's been happening, coordination. So where are we going next, that we can kind of all speak with one voice, and then just having fun together. Some of our rituals or kind of, we'd call them liturgies for Loved and Sent, happen in that meeting. So we do shout outs for each other. That's a way to lift each other up. That's one of our rules on a staff, is we're going to speak well about each other, especially in public. If you have a problem with somebody, do that behind a closed door, or talk to a supervisor to get some help. But in public, whether in front of our church or the rest of our staff, we speak well of each other. That's kind of one of our rules as part of our staff culture. We also do bookmark moments, and we're kind of tweaking that to try to beef it up a little bit. But it has been where in the last month, so kind of since the last staff meeting, who's on your bookmark? Who are you praying for? Do you have a story that you could share about an opportunity maybe Jesus put in front of you to share the gospel, or someone that maybe you're not at the point where you're ready to speak the name of Jesus to them, but you're praying for them, you're kind of building that relationship. So we kind of keep those things on the front burner by doing them together as a staff. Last month, we actually instituted a staff bookmark. We hung it up in our office, where it's these are the people that together we're praying for. So there might be someone on Pastor Jeff's bookmark, but now I'm praying for that person, and our receptionists are praying for that person, and our care pastor is praying for that person. So it's a way to encourage one another, hold each other accountable to kind of that bookmark mindset, and thinking about who Jesus might be sending us to, but also for mutual encouragement. And say, you're not alone in this. No one gets sent by themselves. You're not off on an island, but we do this together. And at the very least, we can do that by praying for one another. So that's the kind of stuff that happens in our all staff meetings. We usually end by singing happy birthday to whoever had birthdays in that month. We have cake at the end. Periodically, we have at least 2-3 times a year where we have like an all staff, just Christmas party, staff appreciation day, full-time staff outing. We do happy hours a handful of times a year, where we're just together, and that helps build that culture of trust with one another. That culture of, I care about this person, not just their position and what they can do. And all of that is very intentionally designed to help navigate what I think is really kind of the core of some of the tension for a multi-site or for a staff that's really spread out. And that's, how do you maintain unity while also empowering people to be sent to their locality, to where they are? Because as soon as you're in 2 different locations, it's really easy to kind of start just drifting apart, and all of a sudden you're doing 2 different things.
Yes.
At the same time,
people find that happens a lot.
Yeah. There's a gravity to multi-site that just kind of pulls apart, right? At the same time, we don't want uniformity, where it's like, what's happening at Christ Memorial, it has to happen the exact same way up at Reliant. That's not helpful. Otherwise, why would we have a Reliant if one of us is redundant there? So it's maintaining that tension between, we're unified in our messaging, we're speaking the same message, although it might sound a little bit differently. We're loved and sent in the same way, although exactly what that looks like on each campus might be a little bit different. And then we empower those who are doing the work, pushing everything down to its most local level to say, yeah, what does this look like in your context? What does this look like to meet the needs of that worshiping community or the people around who aren't necessarily part of the church yet? And so we have those regular touch points throughout meetings to kind of say, okay, we're kind of bringing that empower together. But then when we break, we scatter out and we go. So it's a tension that's lived in, that's managed, not always perfectly and not always well, but I think those times together help build the trust to say, even if you're wondering, hey, is someone out of bounds here? You can know that they're doing it because they're after the same goal. So we can have a conversation about that. That's not conflict based, but say, hey, tell me more about this. What were you thinking? Why were you going for this? Here's what I saw. How do we maintain kind of that unity without uniformity?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the deep end of the leadership pool,
Yeah.
no matter what your position is, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's a special kind of wrinkle, I'll call it, in a church where you've got a lot of people serving in leadership often that are not paid. And so they could walk at any moment. But truthfully, even in a completely paid environment, if you don't have trust, if you don't feel you have any community, you could lose them at any moment too, because if you read any of the leadership things, it's time and time again. It's like, I don't feel valued. I need to go find some place where I feel valued. So
Yeah, and that's where I think person over position has really helped us, because that applies not just on kind of the onboarding part of it, where we kind of think about, okay, who might we know that we can bring in for this position or for this task, but also kind of on the back end as we care for our staff. Churches are a unique environment where I've got people where I'm their boss and also I'm their pastor. And sometimes that can be a really tricky kind of relational dynamic to navigate. Thankfully, on our team, we get to do it together. And so sometimes one of the pastors will wear the pastor hat a little bit more than the boss hat, and kind of vice versa. So we have kind of these different relationships with people. But at the end of the day, my hope is, and we try for this, but that the people on our staff and kind of our key volunteers would say, our pastors and our team cares for me as a person more, for my family, for my spiritual health, for my physical, mental health, more than they care about what I can do for the tasks. And so I think that contributes to the value where people would say, I am cared for here in a way that's beyond just a transaction, beyond a paycheck and tasks done, but I'm cared about as a person.
yeah, that's everything at the end of the day. To know that you're seen and loved and accepted, just as God made you, in all of your wonderfulness and in all of your like little dark corners.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Just want to come back for a second. You used a term, bookmark moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the things that I love about the way that Christ Memorial and Reliant have gone about creating kind of unity to the Loved and Sent journey beyond the initial rollout and all the way through is that those bookmark moments are obviously very powerful in your staff time and in your personal time and as a staff and a unifying moment. One of the other things that they are incredibly powerful for is every single person in your congregation. I had an opportunity to talk with someone who is a member of the Christ Memorial campus, and she said she has like 50 bookmarks Right. And some of them have been filled, and some of them have just a couple of names and got tucked away. Some of them may not have names, and there was a reason for all of that. And they all mark like a time in her life. So a part of that loved and sent journey for her personally, based on who God was putting in her path, how the Spirit was leading her to engage with that person, pray for that person, and what that relationship became. And as I really kind of took in her story, I was really amazed at the power of this tool. And I love how you described how you use it in leadership, and it keeps you guys really walking together on a path, accountability, but also support. Nobody goes alone. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful statement. And I think that for each person in your congregation who uses those bookmarks, they're an incredibly powerful part of their journey too. So, I mean, that's one person that I heard, but I got the sense from her that that's not an unusual story.
No, I don't think it is. So we have probably, sitting around our office in different places, thousands of bookmarks, and we regularly hand them out. A lot of times it's part of at least one of our services throughout the year where everybody who comes to worship that particular weekend gets a bookmark. We have a mission Sunday every year in January. Oftentimes that's the one where we focus on. A couple years ago, we printed out it was like 6 feet tall by 3 feet wide or something like that, a bookmark. And we had it sitting in our commons where people could write on it the name of somebody, or if they didn't want to use a name, initials, or a relationship, like, my friend, or, however much you wanted to disclose. But that our church was then praying for, and it kind of became our church's bookmark. And so when we talk about building culture, part of it is just kind of consistently putting this thing, reminding, not just instructing. And as you remind, you say, hey, here's what this tool is, here's what it's for, here's how you can use it. But it just kind of gets at, oh yeah, here's a way I can practice being loved and sent on a regular basis. And part of, I think, what helps kind of establish that culture overall in our church, and then also, for our staff, because a lot of times, not necessarily our paid staff, but certainly our key volunteers, they're drawn from our pool of members. So when we're thinking about who can lead this ministry, we're thinking about people that we already know. We have in our new member class, it's a 6-week, now 7-week class, where we kind of go through everything from, what is God's word, what does it say, all the way through to what does loved and sent mean for our church, and how do we live that out? And in a lot of ways, it tracks along with the book Loved and Sent. So we talk about things like, who is God, 10 Commandments, the Creed, what does that say? We talk about purpose and vocation, and all kind of in the context of Loved and Sent. And we require everyone coming into our church to go through this class. There's been exceptions throughout the years, but those are rare. So it doesn't matter if you've been Lutheran for 80 years and you grew up in the Lutheran church and you might think it's just an easy transfer, or if you're, brand new baby Christian and just kind of heard the name of Jesus for the first time last week. We ask everybody come in here, come through that class. And what that does is it gives common language. It lets us talk about things like the bookmark and loved and sent, and a few other of those handles, where as we then talk about them in sermons or in Bible classes or with service opportunities and things like that, it's not the first time someone's hearing it. And so over the years, as people have joined our church, now we have kind of this whole pool of people who's come in kind of with the loved and sent language. And that's really what you think about when you think about culture, is how is someone able to articulate it for themselves, and is it influencing, how they think, how they speak, what they do. And it starts with kind of really at the entry point coming into the church.
That's great. That's good. And yes, the common language is, I think, underrated. And in a lot of places, that we just assume that everybody is like us. And so we all interpret words the same way, or that everybody has the same rhythms or whatever. And oftentimes it's not true, especially if you're a thriving congregation where you have people who have not grown up in the same, way. Maybe they, yeah, as you said, maybe they met Jesus last week. Praise God for that. But they're not going to think about things or understand words the same way that you will. So yeah, I think that's really, really genius on your part to require that, and to just help everybody right from the very beginning become family.
Yeah, and it's part of the beauty of it when it's working well is you're now coming through a class with a bunch of other people who are also new. And so especially in a larger congregation context, it's easy to fall through the cracks or just kind of show up on Sunday and then, leave right after the last song, and there's no relationship there. And so that's another of our congregational values is relational. We believe the gospel runs along relational lines. That comes out in Loved and Sent. I think Jeff got that from someone else, but it's true. You have to earn trust before you're able to tell someone about Jesus. We talk about value of staff and of people. It's based on a relationship. And so how are we caring for people well? And our goal through that class is to say, we're not just going to give you a bunch of content, a bunch of information, but we're going to work so that we get to know you a little bit, you get to know us a little bit, and some of the people coming around you, so that by the time you've gone from, week 1 of the class through week 7, hopefully you've built some friendships. There's some people that you're seeing on Sunday mornings or Saturday night that you recognize and have some commonality with, and that all of a sudden you can say, yeah, we're in this together. It's not just me and Jesus. That's really important. But it's me and Jesus and kind of all of the other people God has sent to this place. We're together. We get to go out to make His name known.
It's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Paul, for being with us today. We really, really appreciate your time and your insights and all the wisdom that you have shared. I know it's going to help people tremendously on their Loved and Sent journey, but also just in thinking about culture and creating family. And so we just really appreciate your time. I'd love for you all to join me again the next time we have a meetup, which will be in September. It'll be September 27th at 10 a.m. right here in the community. And at that time, we're going to be talking about a day of service. You heard that mentioned many times here as part of the secret sauce of creating culture. And we're going to be unpacking some details on what that means and how to do that well. So love to see you in a month, September 27th, right here. Thank you and have a great day.